I want you to try a thought experiment with me for a second.
Okay.
If I asked you to close your eyes and picture the ultimate, the high-performance believer, someone who's completely mastered the spiritual life, what image pops into your head?
That's interesting you use the phrase high performance.
Yeah.
Because I think for most of us, the image is incredibly active. We picture someone who is just busy.
Right, always doing something.
Exactly. Maybe they're volunteering at a shelter 4 days a week. They're leading 2 different study groups.
Waking up at 4 a.m. to read ancient Greek.
Right. And they probably have these intense, weeping, emotional breakthroughs every single time they pray.
Right. It's the max effort model.
Yeah.
We tend to equate more with better.
Yeah.
More sweat, more tears, more books read, more hours logged. If you're exhausted, you must be holy.
It's basically hustle culture, but for the soul.
It is. And that creates a very specific kind of pressure, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. If you aren't feeling these big emotions or if you aren't producing, visible results, you feel like you're failing.
Which is why the stack of papers I have on my desk today is, well, it's a bit of a grenade.
Oh, I like the sound of that.
We are looking at excerpts from The Path of Interior Silence and Pure Faith.
Okay.
Specifically the writings of Miguel de Molinos from the 17th century.
Yeah.
And honestly, this text, it doesn't just suggest a different way. It actively attacks that high-performance model we just described.
It does. It calls all that busyness a trap. Molinos was a key figure in what's often called Quietism, and as we dive into chapters 12 through 14 today, you're going to see why.
So what does he argue then?
He argues that God isn't looking for the smartest person in the room or the most emotional or even the most productive.
He's looking for something else entirely.
Something completely different.
And I have to warn the listener, and maybe myself, that what we're about to discuss is very counterintuitive.
It can be.
We are going to unpack 3 specific stages from these texts. First, we're going to look at the concept of self-seeking and why wanting to feel good when you pray might actually be the enemy of true faith.
That's a hard one for people to swallow. It really is.
It is. Second, we'll look at the discipline of quietness. We're going to break down why doing nothing is so much harder than doing something. Specifically looking at a letter from a woman named Chantal who really struggled with feeling like a lazy beast.
That letter is so raw, so relatable.
And finally, we'll explore the paradox of surrender and why, if you've actually surrendered to God, you probably need to stop talking about it.
It's a guide to stripping away the performance. I mean, the mission of this deep dive is to explore what happens when the lights go off, the audience leaves, the feelings evaporate, and you're just there.
It's about the art of interior silence.
That's it.
So let's jump right into chapter 12. This is where the text really throws the first punch. Molinos starts by basically dismantling our reliance on our senses.
To understand chapter 12, you have to understand the human mechanism we all operate on, which is the feedback loop.
Your feedback loop.
Think about it. If you go to the gym and lift weights, you feel sore the next day.
Right.
That soreness is feedback. It tells you, good job, you built muscle. If you study a textbook, you learn a new fact. That's feedback. Good job, you're smarter.
And we naturally want that same feedback in our spiritual lives. We expect it.
We crave it. We want the tingles. We want the God bumps. We want that swelling emotional release or that sudden intellectual aha moment where the universe just aligns.
Yeah.
And Molinos opens this chapter by dropping a hammer on that desire. He says, that isn't God. That is you.
Wow. That is a harsh distinction.
Yeah.
He's saying the feeling of God isn't God.
He's saying that God does not prize the believers who are the most diligent or the ones with the sharpest intellects or even the ones with the deepest feelings. He explicitly writes that God treasures those who suffer for him in silence.
Suffer in silence. Okay, I have to push back on this a little bit just from the perspective of a normal person.
Go for it.
That sounds miserable. It sounds like a marketing pitch for depression. Come join us. We sit in a dark room and feel bad. Why would anyone sign up for that?
It sounds that way if you interpret suffering as, physical pain or some kind of emotional masochism.
Which is how it sounds at first.
But that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about the suffering of deprivation. He's critiquing the reliance on external senses. The text argues that deep prayer has absolutely nothing to do with your 5 senses or your natural preferences.
So let's make this concrete. When I sit down to meditate or pray, And I'm hoping for that warm, fuzzy feeling of peace.
Yeah.
The text says that desire is actually a problem.
Explicitly. The source text calls this self-seeking.
Self-seeking.
He sees it as a form of spiritual narcissism. Molinos argues that if you are looking for beautiful prayer words or intellectual enjoyment, that feeling of being smart and insightful,
Right.
you aren't seeking the divine. You are seeking self-love. You're using God as a mechanism to trigger a dopamine hit.
That is uncomfortably accurate. It's so transactional. I put in the prayer time, you give me the serotonin.
Precisely. You're consuming God, not communing with him. You're using him like a vending machine for emotional stability.
Ouch.
And the text gets very dark here regarding the implications. It says that the enemy, the spiritual adversary, uses this desire for good feelings as a weapon against you.
How so? If I want to feel good about God, how is that bad?
Well, think about what happens when you don't get the feeling.
Okay.
You sit down, you try to be quiet, and nothing. You feel bored, you feel distracted, you feel dry. What is your immediate assumption?
That I'm doing it wrong? Or that God is mad at me?
Right.
Or that I'm just talking to the ceiling?
Right. And Molinos says that is exactly where the trap springs. The enemy whispers, see, it's not working. God isn't speaking to you. You're wasting your time.
And because you're addicted to the feeling of connection.
You believe the connection is broken just because the emotional signal is lost.
So Molinos is trying to break that addiction. He's saying the signal is still there, even if the audio is out.
Just trying to wean us off the candy so we can eat the meat. He uses this powerful phrase, we need to have the sentiment of a martyr in the depths of our soul.
There's that word again, martyrdom. It's so intense.
It is heavy, but let's unpack the metaphor. A martyr is someone who dies for their beliefs. Molinos is calling for an internal dying. You have to let your need for entertainment die. You have to let your need for validation die. You have to be willing to sit in the silence when it is completely dry, boring, and unresponsive.
So the dry season, that time when you feel absolutely nothing, it isn't a mistake? It's not a sign of failure?
No, according to this text, it's a requirement. It's a checkpoint. Molinos says you must pass through pain and dryness to enter the door to God.
The door.
He writes that God looks for a pure heart, not a busy brain.
That's interesting because in almost every other area of life, boredom or lack of results means stop. If I'm digging a hole for oil and I don't find oil, I stop digging. But Molinos is saying, if you're digging and you don't find the oil of emotion, keep digging.
Because the oil isn't the point. The digging is the point. The text says that this door leads to a realization of your own nothingness and the Lord's allness. You can't realize you are nothing if you are busy feeling like something.
Because you had a really poetic thought or a great emotional cry.
Yes. If I'm patting myself on the back for how good my prayer was, I'm taking up all the space in the room.
I see.
So the source says that if you are suffering in silence, feeling dry, bored, maybe even feeling like a failure, you haven't wasted a second.
You're actually closer.
You are actually closer to the eternal reward in that moment of boredom than you are when you're excited and happy.
That is a massive claim. Why? What's the logic there?
Because in the boredom, you are there for him. You clearly aren't there for the fun of it because it isn't fun.
Right. There's no payoff for me.
You aren't there for the ego boost because you feel like a failure. So if you stay, the only reason you are staying is pure faith.
That's the refining fire. It burns away the selfishness because there's nothing in it for self.
That's the fire. It proves that your intention is pure. Molinos writes that God looks at the intention of the heart. Are you willing to be a door that opens to him rather than a wall of your own emotions?
It reclaims boredom as a spiritual discipline, which is good news for me because I'm great at being bored.
Don't be so sure. Real intentional boredom. I mean, sitting in silence without reaching for your phone or your own thoughts.
It's agonizing.
It's agonizing for the modern mind.
That's true. And that leads us perfectly into chapter 13 because, okay, we've established that chasing feelings is self-seeking. We need to embrace the dryness. But practically, how?
Right.
What do I do if I'm not supposed to be doing anything?
And this is the how-to section, which Molinos calls the discipline of quietness. And the instruction sounds deceptively simple. Hand the whole person over to God via faith, and then remain there in silence.
Remain there. That's the tricky part, isn't it? My brain doesn't like to remain.
No.
It likes to wander, plan dinner, and replay arguments from 2012.
And Molinos knows that. He says we use this silence to stop the wandering mind, But to help us understand the nature of this surrender, he gives us an analogy.
Okay.
And I have to say, of all the mystical texts I've read, this is one of the most practical mental images I've ever found. It's the analogy of the jewel.
I really marked this section up in my notes. I think this exposes a lot of our neuroses. So walk us through the jewel.
Okay. Molinos asks you to imagine a scenario. Imagine you have a precious jewel, a diamond, a ruby, something of immense value.
Got it.
And you decide to give it to your best friend.
Okay. I hand you the diamond. Here, this is for you.
Right. You hand it over, the transfer is complete, I put it in my pocket. Now, imagine if 5 minutes later you came up to me and said, hey, just so you know, I gave you that diamond.
Okay. Little weird, but fine.
And then 10 minutes later, I really want you to know, I surrendered that diamond to you. It is yours. And then an hour later, I am currently giving you the diamond. Please accept this diamond I am giving you.
That would be incredibly annoying.
This would be weird, right? But more than annoying, what does it imply about you?
It implies I'm anxious about.
Yes.
It implies I don't really trust that you have it. Or maybe I haven't really let go of it in my heart.
Exactly.
I keep bringing it up because I'm still attached to it. I want credit for the giving.
Exactly. You are validating the transaction because you don't trust the transaction. Molinos applies this directly to prayer. He says, once you have surrendered yourself to God, once you've given the jewel of your will, stop talking about it.
Stop talking about the surrender.
Stop reminding God that you're surrendering. He heard you the first time. The text says if you truly gave it, it's his. Just let him keep it.
That is a direct hit on how I usually pray. I feel like 90% of prayer, especially in desperate moments, is us anxiously reassuring ourselves.
Yeah.
Lord, I surrender. No, really, I surrender. Did you hear me? I'm letting go.
And Molinos argues that constant repetition is actually a sign of doubt. He calls it taking back the gift.
Wait, define taking it back. Because if I'm just thinking about it, have I taken it back? That's what I'd worry about.
And he clarifies that. He's very specific because he doesn't want you to become neurotic.
Good.
Taking it back doesn't mean you just forgot for a second that you gave it or that you had a fleeting thought of worry. It means committing a distinct sin or actively violating the divine will.
Okay, so it's a deliberate act.
It's a deliberate act. Basically, unless you actively run into the room, snatch the jewel from God's hand, and run away, the gift is still given.
So I don't need to renew the subscription every 5 seconds.
No, you don't. The transaction is done. He says we need to retreat from external heat. That's his phrase for that frantic, sweaty need to do and say things to make it real.
But, and here's where we get into the psychology of it, doing nothing feels terrible. It feels unsafe. And the text actually addresses this feeling directly with a fascinating inclusion.
It does.
There's a letter included in the source material from someone the text calls Chantal.
Yes. Historians generally believe this refers to a contemporary mystic, possibly connected to the Quietist movement in France. But the content is what's important. This letter is raw.
So raw.
It is a cry for help.
It really is. She writes about feeling useless and unworthy because she was just sitting there in silence.
And listen to the language she uses. She describes an urge to do good deeds just to feel valuable. She says she felt like a lazy beast, merely resting in God's presence while others were out there working.
A lazy beast.
Mm-hmm.
I think every listener can relate to that guilt, that I need to earn my keep mentality.
Of course.
If I'm not producing, do I even exist?
It's the fear of passivity. We are terrified that if we stop rowing the boat, we'll drown. Chantal writes that she tried to use reasoning and effort to feel better.
She tried to think her way out of the silence.
Yes. But she says it was exhausting, it required so much force, and it yielded nothing.
She was trying to force a spiritual experience through sheer willpower.
Exactly. She's trying to work for the jewel she had already given away.
So what was the breakthrough for her? How did she resolve that panic?
She realized she had to close her eyes.
Metaphorically?
We're not both. Likely. But metaphorically, she uses this beautiful visual of leaning on her beloved God and deliberately not looking for the road ahead.
Mm-hmm.
She writes that she had to be willing to disappear in his presence.
Disappear in his presence. That is the anti-influencer goal.
It is. She realized that trying to see the future or trying to understand what God was doing in the silence was just another form of control.
Right. If I can understand it, I can control it.
The text says we need to stop struggling to see. We need to stop asking for other favors. The favor is the presence.
It's like being in a room with your spouse or your best friend. You don't need to be juggling balls or telling jokes to justify being there.
You can just be there.
Yeah.
But notice how much trust that requires. If you're with a stranger, silence is awkward. You feel the need to fill it.
Right.
If you're with someone you deeply trust, silence is comfortable, Molinos is saying. Get to the place where you trust God enough to be quiet with him.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
But reality check.
Okay.
Even if I want to just be there,
Yeah.
my brain has other plans. I sit down, I hand over the jewel, I close my eyes, and suddenly I'm thinking about penguins.
Penguins.
Or my taxes.
Yeah.
Or that weird noise the car is making.
The universal struggle. This brings us to chapter 14, distractions.
I feel like this chapter was written specifically for me.
It was written for everyone, and this is where the text is surprisingly gentle.
Right.
You might expect a hardcore mystic like Molinos to say, if you get distracted, you have failed. Start over. Whip yourself.
That's what I usually tell myself. I can't focus, therefore I'm a bad Christian.
But he says, do not be sad. Do not be discouraged.
Wow.
He offers a very specific theology of distraction, if you want to call it that. He argues that there are two types of distractions.
Go on.
There's the voluntary distraction, where you sit down to pray and then decide, you know what, I'm actually going to plan my vacation right now.
Okay, that's on me. That's purposeful.
Right. But then there's the involuntary distraction, the imagination running wild, the random thoughts, the penguins, as you said.
Yeah.
Molinos argues that as long as the distraction isn't intentional, the prayer is still effective.
Wait, unpack that. How is the prayer effective if I'm thinking about penguins?
Because of the jewel. Go back
Yeah.
to the jewel analogy. The intention you set at the beginning, the giving of the will, is still valid.
Okay.
Molino says, do not forget, it is he who prays inside you. The text argues that the spirit is maintaining the connection even while your surface-level imagination is running loops.
That is a huge relief. So the signal doesn't drop just because my screensaver came on.
That's a great way to put it. The connection is deeper than your conscious thought. He says if you aren't deliberately letting your mind wander, you haven't lost the fruit of the prayer. You are still in the room.
Even if you're looking out the window for a second.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the text also warns against the repetition trap, again here. It seems like Molinos really, really hates repetitive prayers, or what he calls sensible acts.
He does. He criticizes the habit of constantly saying, Lord, you are here, or Lord, I am yours.
Yes.
Why is he so against that? It sounds pious.
Because he believes the less you force your memory and speech, the stronger your foundation becomes. He wants you to move from saying to being.
From saying to being.
He argues that constantly stating a fact implies you don't really believe it's a fact. And this is where we get my absolute favorite analogies in the entire text.
I know exactly which ones you mean. The mountain and the married woman.
Yes, these are profound. And they are funny in a dry 17th century way.
Okay, let's start with the mountain. The text says...
Oh, tell us. He says, picture a mountain. A massive, solid mountain.
Okay.
Does that mountain spend its day saying, I am a mountain, look at me, I'm a mountain, just check it in, still a mountain?
No, it just sits there. It just is.
Right, it just is a mountain. Its identity isn't established by its speech, it's established by its existence. If it stopped saying, I am a mountain, would it cease to be a mountain?
Of course not.
So Molinos asks, why do you need to constantly tell God you are his? If you are his, you are his. Be the mountain.
That's strong. It's about ontology being versus performance. But the second one hits even harder for me. The married woman.
This one is brilliant. He says, imagine a woman who is happily married. Does she walk around the market square telling everyone she meets, I am married, I am married, I am married?
Imagine if she did. You'd think she was having a breakdown.
Or you'd think she was trying to convince herself.
Yeah, or that she was really insecure about the relationship. Like she has to prove it exists by saying it out loud.
Exactly. Molino says these are immutable facts. A mountain is a mountain. A wife is a wife. Stating them constantly is unnecessary noise.
And he applies this to the Christian.
He asks, why do you feel the need to walk around saying, I am a Christian, or I am faithful?
You should just exist as one.
You should exist as one. He says, even if you are not thinking, I am a Christian, you are still a Christian. It's a state of being, not a mental activity.
That's deep. It's moving the identity from the mouth to the heart.
That's the core shift. The text urges a shift from using the mouth to speak to using the heart to believe.
Right.
Just as a wife shows love by living faithfully by her actions and her internal posture towards her husband, a believer seeks God through internal faith, not by constantly broadcasting their status updates to the sky.
It really is the difference between a relationship and a performance.
Perfectly said. A performance requires constant noise and activity to keep the audience engaged. A relationship, a true, deep, old relationship, can survive and even thrive in total silence. Think about an old couple on a porch. They don't need to talk. They don't need to remind each other they are married. They just are.
That is the goal of Molinos.
That's it. It's stripping away the insecurity. It's saying, I trust this enough to be quiet about it.
It is, and that takes immense courage. So let's try to recap this deep dive method we've pulled from these chapters, because it feels like a progression.
It is.
It's not just be quiet, it's a specific path.
It is a 3-step process to interior silence.
Okay, so step 1, stop looking for entertainment. Stop self-seeking.
Right. Except that dryness and boredom are actually the door to a deeper reality. If you feel nothing, don't panic. You aren't being ignored. You are being purified.
You are learning to love the giver, not the gift.
Exactly.
Okay, step 2, give the gift and don't ask for it back. Hand over the jewel of your will.
And then stop talking about it. Trust that the transaction is done. Don't be the annoying friend who keeps reminding God of what you gave him. Silence your sensible acts and just trust the surrender.
And step 3,
Yeah.
stop announcing your status. Just be the mountain.
Yes. Accept that your distractions don't disqualify you. Stop trying to prove you're a Christian by saying it and start trusting that you are one.
Move your faith from your mouth to your heart.
That's the whole journey.
It sounds so simple, but it requires so much trust. It's the ultimate letting go of the wheel.
That's the key word, trust. The text concludes by telling us that faith and desire are the guides. They're the only things you need.
Faith and desire.
Molinos writes that you don't need to see God with physical eyes or feel him with physical emotions. Believing he is present is enough.
Faith and desire, not eloquence and emotion.
Exactly.
So I want to pivot for a second. We've been talking about 17th century mystics and Spanish priests, but why does this matter for the person listening right now, maybe on their commute, maybe doing dishes? Why should they care about interior silence?
I think it matters more now than it did in the 1600s.
Why is that?
Because we live in the era of performance.
We really...
Everything we do is performative. We perform our careers on LinkedIn. We perform our social lives on Instagram. We track our sleep, our steps, our calories.
We're obsessed with data and feedback.
We constantly need to know, how am I doing?
We want the likes from God.
Yeah.
We want the analytics.
We do. We treat spirituality like a Fitbit.
Did I hit my prayer steps today? Did I feel the burn? Did I get the badge? And this text frees the listener from that crushing pressure.
It's an off-ramp from the hustle.
It is. It says you don't need the feedback loop. You don't need the spiritual tingles. You don't need the eloquent words.
All you need is a pure intention.
A pure intention to be with the divine. It validates the struggle of the quiet, boring, dry days. It tells you that those days, the days you feel like a lazy beast,
Yeah.
they might actually be the most spiritual days of your life.
It's permission to stop trying so hard and just start being. Yeah. Yes. It's the permission to be the mountain. You don't have to shout to be solid.
I love that.
Yeah.
You don't have to shout to be solid. That's going on a sticky note.
Good.
Before we wrap up, I want to ask you, what is the one thing that really stuck with you from this reading? The thing you're going to be thinking about later?
You know, it brings up a really provocative thought for me. We are so obsessed with feedback, as we just discussed.
Right.
But this text suggests that the highest form of connection happens when there is zero feedback.
Zero feedback. That is terrifying to the modern ego.
It is. But think about it. When you are dry, when you feel nothing, when your mind is wandering, and yet you stay in the chair anyway, that is the only time you can be sure you are there for the person and not for the pleasure.
That's the litmus test.
It is. If every time you prayed you felt amazing, how would you know if you loved God or if you just loved the endorphins? You wouldn't. You couldn't know.
You'd be in love with the experience, not the being.
Exactly. So the question I'd leave the listener with is this. Is your devotion based on the reward of the feeling or the reality of the relationship?
Wow.
Can you sit in a room with God, get absolutely no response, feel totally bored, and still say, I'm glad I'm here? Because according to Molinos, that is where the real faith begins.
That is a challenge worth chewing on. The difference between a fair weather friend and a true partner.
It is.
Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us. This was quieter than usual, but in a good way.
My pleasure.
And to you listening, try it out. Try 5 minutes of just being a mountain. Don't explain yourself. Don't look for a feeling.
For more spiritual resources, visit lokaken.ai.